Okay, so this wasn't really a planned video, but I think it highlights a real problem in this country, which is the dishonesty of our justice system, and that's what I'm calling it, dishonesty, notably over so-called life sentences. Um, Whole life tariffs are given in this country on very rare occasions for usually serial killers or crimes so heinous that the perpetrators are literally never released. They die in prison. Um, this particular case that I'm going to quote surely should be a case where a whole life tariff was imposed, and yet that wasn't the case. And the offender in question has just been released. This is the headline. It's from ITV News. Triple child killer David McGreevy released from prison after 46 years. So 46 years is a long time, but what this man done, in my view, was so evil that he should never be released. I'm not going to read out the whole report because it's a bit long. I'll put a link to the report. But 1973, Worcester, southwest England. This guy, David McGreevy, was 21 at the time. He was a lodger, and he was left in charge of babysitting three children. And because they were crying, he murdered them. He murdered 4-year-old Paul Ralph and his sisters Dawn, 2, and Samantha, 9 months. As if that wasn't evil enough, murdering three children, he then hanged the bodies outside on railings. And the mother, Elsie Uri, who's since moved to Hampshire, was told by a caseworker by phone that this guy had just been released. He was 21 at the time, which would make about 68, 69 now. So he could, in theory, live for another 20 or 30 years in freedom. These three children never had a life. Now, the um, the rationale for releasing them is that this parole board um, found that he had developed self-control and a considerable understanding of the problems that he has had and what caused them. And he takes full responsibility for what he did. I just find this disgusting that a child killer, a triple child killer, can be released because they're regretted and they have responsibility for it. The psychologist identified a number of factors which made it less likely that Mr. McGreevy will reoffend in future. The issue here shouldn't be about reoffending, even if that can be proven that he won't reoffend. What he done, the crime that he was jailed for, in my view, was so evil that he should never be released. The MP for the area, let me just get to that section, had written to Justice Minister several times. Bear with me a second, I'm just scrolling down the report. Um, yeah, we hear this. In crimes which shocked the nation, it emerged that Paul had been strangled, Dawn was found with her throat cut, and Samantha died from a compound fracture to the skull. McGreevy, a family friend and lodger, then impaled their bodies on the spiked garden railings of their terrace house in Gillam Street in the Rainbow Hill area of Worcester. A document from the parole board about McGreevy's case following a hearing in November 2018 referred to a victim personal statement from the children's mother. In it, she set out the devastating effect that deaths had on her and still do have. I can't imagine the hell that woman's been through. Conservative MP for Worcester Robin Walker, who has repeatedly written to successive Justice ministers and Home Secretaries objecting to McGreevy's release, said, "Frankly, I don't think someone who carried out such crimes should ever be let out." I agree with him. I think he's right. And this is the thing I find twisted. He first became eligible for release in 1993, just 20 years after the event. I can understand some circumstances where you might have a parole hearing. Let's say you have someone who maybe has killed someone in self defense, or let's say you have two men who have a fist fight and one guy, hits his head and he dies. That's tragic and it's awful. But I do see a difference in a case like that from a case like this, where someone has deliberately murdered three children. I mean, it could well be that he's targeted by vigilantes, but he is free, and it shows something very, very rotten in our criminal justice system, which is that parole boards, the Sentencing Council of England and Wales, and too many judges are not on the side of victims. They need their heads examined. I really do wonder about the mentality of people who would make this sort of decision. I really would like to see what goes through their puny little minds to make them reach this decision. Because he won't reoffend again? Do they not recognise what he was put in jail for in the first place? Doesn't matter if he won't reoffend again. I really find it hard to respect the people who make these decisions. I mean, this guy is evil, there's no question about it. Anyone who would do that to three children, I think, is just naturally evil. I don't think that someone like that can ever or should ever be rehabilitated, even if it's proven that they'll never reoffend again. What they've done in the first place is enough reason that they should be locked up forever. And we have heard of cases where people have been released because they've been deemed to have reformed and then they go out to commit another crime. It's just reckless. So I really do think that we need a revolution in the criminal justice system whereby, for example, a life sentence means life. So if a life sentence is handed down, it shouldn't be eligible for parole after 15 or 20 years. A life sentence should be handed down for the most serious cases. I don't think that's necessarily every murder case, because I do think that there are some murder cases that are different from others. A crime of passion, for example, um, let's say you have a love triangle. I mean, I'm not saying that's okay, it's still murder, but surely murdering a child, surely it doesn't get much more evil than that. Or murdering a pensioner for their life savings. We just need to have I think the criminal justice system is absolutely rotten. I really do. And it's so disillusioning to, like I say, this guy will now be in his late 60s. That's not that old by today's standards. He could live for another 20 years, which would be the same length of time that he would have served in prison before he was eligible for his first parole hearing. Think about that for a second. So, had he been released in 1993, he wasn't, but let's say he was, the implications of that would have been that he served, well, you see what I'm driving at here. I think we need a government that is a prime minister, a home secretary, a justice secretary that really starts to put heat on the sentencing council. I don't think the sentencing council is fit for purpose. I understand they have. I wrote to them to raise concerns about a whole range of issues. They have 10 members of that committee. They have one representing victims. It's an absolute travesty. It makes my blood boil. And like I say, I can only imagine what the mother's going through. He is barred from the Worcester area. That's not good enough. This guy should never have been released. And there's other similar cases.